You're live.
Good evening, everyone. This is Chair Cynthia Wenstrom and welcoming you to the McDowell Sonoran Preserve Commission meeting. It is Thursday, August 12th. I will call the roll and we'll start with Vice Chair Lapat Palasco,
Lapat Palasco present.
Commissioner Coluccio,
Coluccio present.
Commissioner Hackbar,
Commissioner Hackbarth is present.
Commissioner Lips,
Commissioner Lips present.
Commissioner Olson,
Commissioner Olson present.
and Commissioner Smith.
Commissioner Smith present.
Thank you. Croy, we have one public comment. Did you want to speak to that?
Yes. Yes, just wanted to let the commission know you all would have received this in your emails. We did receive an email from Randall Ford and it was speaking to e-bikes, and that will be part of the public record, fairly lengthy, so I won't read the entire document, but it will be part of the public record and you all have copies of it.
Thank you. And at this time, we're going to approve the minutes from June 3rd. Has everyone had a chance to review? And were there any comments, questions, or changes? I hear none. I
Just
only
one.
saw, oh, yes, Commissioner Hackbar? Yes, I had that as well. Thank you. That's the top on the top heading there. Anything else? Then I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as stated with the one change for spelling. Motion?
I have a motion to approve the minutes from August 12th.
Okay, that's
2000
Vice Chair.
I mean,
Pat
sorry, from,
Velasco.
yeah, June 3rd, 2021.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
And a second, please.
Commissioner Lips, second.
Thank you so much. And then let's vote on approving the minutes, starting with Vice Chair Palat.
Lapat Palasco approves the minutes.
Commissioner Coluccio,
Commissioner Coluccio approves.
Commissioner Hackbar,
I approve.
Commissioner Lips,
Commissioner Lips approves.
Commissioner Olson,
Commissioner Olson approves.
Commissioner Smith.
Commissioner Smith approves.
Thank you. And Chair Wenstrom approves. Thank you.
Excuse me. This is Tina from eScribers, and I did not hear what the correction was.
Yes, the correction was the heading of the document, minutes, is misspelled.
Oh, the word minutes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you, Tina. Corey, do you want to lead the item number 5, the approval of the bylaws?
Correct. Thank you. This was an item that we had on the February 11th commission meeting, and the process is a two-step process requiring you to determine if there are any changes. And if there are or not, we then bring it to the next meeting. Apparently, in the excitement of pandemic, we neglected to put it on the next agenda and get it approved. For those that weren't here, there were no recommendations for changes, but so we did intend to bring it back to a later meeting and omitted doing that. And so you have a copy of the bylaws before you. It's required that you review them and update them every year. And so we do need to complete this task, and you'll get the chance to do it again in the first of 2022 as well.
I'm sorry, how often do we get a chance to review?
At a minimum, you're required to review it every year. You always have the opportunity to ask for a re-review throughout the year, but at a minimum, it's required that you check them every year.
Thank you. So, yeah,
And Commissioner Coluccio?
Yeah, Croy, and it was the city attorney that was wanting to review them and to see if there's any tweaks or changes that need to be made. Is that right?
And that is a requirement as well, but
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So with that, do we have any, we didn't have any suggested changes. Is
At
there
that
anything
time.
else, or could just take a vote?
You are open to either suggesting changes, which if that's the case, we'd bring them back at the next meeting.
Okay,
Or if you're comfortable with them as is for today, go ahead and make a recommendation to accept them and we will move on with that.
okay. Commissioners, any comments? No comments. then I make a recommendation that we accept them as they are printed and go to a vote. Mhm. All right, so let's vote to approve. Oh, excuse me, of course we do. A
Commissioner.
motion, please, to approve those minutes. Approve the commission bylaws, I beg your pardon.
Commissioner Cluccio moves to approve the bylaws as already stated or already in existence.
And a second, please.
Commissioner Hackbarth will second.
Thank you. And a vote. So we will go to starting with Vice Chair Pat Palasco.
Pat Palasco approves.
All right, and Commissioner Coluccio,
Coluccio approves.
Commissioner Hackbar,
Commissioner Hackbarth approves.
Commissioner Lips. Lips approves. Commissioner Olson,
Commissioner Olson approves.
Commissioner Smith,
Smith approves.
and Chair Wenstrom approves. Thank you. Item number 6, preserve policy process.
All right. Again, this is Corey Aquila, Preserve Director, and what I want to do is just update you. This next slide is the City Council and went through a process themselves of their strategic objectives. And within that, this is just a snippet of several that they have, but these two in particular speak to the preserve. The first one is speaking to additional land acquisition within the preserve. And the second one speaks to future maintenance needs and funding and exploring the options for how we would fund those. Very much consistent with the work effort that the commission has been going on the past several years. But one, we wanted to make you aware of this. Two, the next slide is just then the reminder of the various elements that we've been working on. And there really isn't a change to those 7 items of land acquisition and preserve operations, et cetera, et cetera. But what there is a little bit of a tweak in both timing and then in what we really want to focus on. And the idea would be that that last line, the comprehensive funding review and recommendations, would come at a later point in time. What we're really looking at, we've met with, Scott and I have met with the charter officers who all report to the council. And the recommendation is let's focus on what are the costs, what are the concepts, and what are the prioritizations of those various costs, and bring that back. And so next slide. This is that chart that we've been working on. And I know not everybody can read it all, but it has those same 7 bullet points that I just had previously. And the real goal then would be to continue working on filling out all the costs. And again, there can be ranges and other things like that. And then the next slide shows we would de-emphasize the comprehensive funding and review for the time being. And from a processing standpoint, time-wise, my next slide is a graphic that we've looked at, and we would use the period between now and through November to look at all of those various elements that we have on the chart. And then in December, be prepared to present to the city council where you are. It doesn't have to be done per se, but if we have ranges or concepts, we have that. Take their feedback. It would be most likely a work study session of the council in which it can be presented. They can have dialogue and discussion. We might have the chair there to be able to speak to things. We'll work out the details of how that works, but then take the information or feedback from the council and use the rest of the winter, spring, et cetera, to update that. And also whatever public process we want to be using or is available to us at that time, and develop recommendations. And it's impossible to read that graphic on this, but what it basically says is to have recommendations to the council by spring, summer of next year. And then the funding options and the process of any, whether votes are required or things like that, would be something that the council will be looking at a holistic process citywide. And so they may, in our feedback sessions, work study, ask for specific research or other things. We'll kind of figure that out on the way. But so it really is not much of a change. It will require us to continue our homework assignment. So going back to this next page that I had, and the two areas that would probably, and I'll bring this back at the next meeting, is that we would look at the opportunity for matching grant dollars or other funding sources and the prioritization, so that we can give ourselves and the council kind of a full perspective that whatever out of those you think are the highest priorities, we can focus on that. I would probably also have land acquisition as item 1, and then I have the others as items 2A through 2 whatever. And we can then respond to the council's strategic objectives along those 2 lines. It was at least the thinking that I had. None of this is absolute tonight. I just wanted to really make you aware that the council had taken this action the 1st of July to have their strategic objectives, and for us to be able to respond to that. Very subtle adjustments probably to the process that we're at, and continue with our programs here as we get further into it in September, October, November, and be prepared to give them an update by December of this year. Whether they're ready for us in December or January, we'll work out with their schedule. But I think it makes sense in visiting with the chair to be prepared for December, and that works in well with the overall process as we looked at it. So again, these are their 2 key strategic objectives related to the preserve. Happy to answer any questions or take any feedback that you have right now. My goal would be before the next meeting to do a few edits, showing you where we're making some recommended adjustments. And at the next meeting, we can talk about those in case there's any edits or tweaks that you'd like to do. So that's the process that I wanted to visit with you about, and happy to take any feedback at this time.
Croy, this is Commissioner Cluccio. And so could you please explain why the comprehensive funding piece is being pulled out once again? I didn't quite get that.
And it's not that it's necessarily being pulled out. I think we're just
Delayed.
We're letting that, we're working on first identifying what all the elements and costs are and prioritizing those, so that then from a funding standpoint, the various strategies that would be available to the city, because what the council's talking about is really a citywide strategic analysis of funding and whether those are taxes, whatever fees, et cetera, might be available. And so the goal would be that we don't get ahead of that process, but rather we provide them, because the expectation is there's other elements of the city that will be providing feedback as to what our needs. And so this is kind of a need identification for funding, and get that before them. And then we'll hear feedback as to what are some of the considerations. Obviously, we have the existing sales taxes and where those will go in the future, requiring citizen vote. Those would all be discussion items. And it was just more of a matter of not having that part get ahead of the various costs and wants and needs.
All right, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Any other questions, Lori?
Commissioner Palasko, Cora, I know, so you talk about the first priority that the council said was land acquisition, and then the second one was related to maintenance, and then you were going to prioritize, A to F or whatever, A to G. Has the city and your group started to put together what they think that order of 2A, B, C, D, E, F looks like yet, or not?
Quite honestly, no, I've not tried to get ahead of you guys on that. Partly because we don't even have all the costs fully identified. And so we wanted to kind of complete that. And I think as we're doing that, having a discussion, and really we're going to be interested in your feedback on that, because ultimately whatever we come forward with a request and of what the needs are, and then how we go about funding those, we want to make sure that this commission representing the citizenry is on board with that. And so we'll certainly help guide your questions and feedback. But we were not looking to get out in front of that. We will be more than happy, though, to give you input as we go through that.
Other questions? Carrie? Oh, yeah, Jeffrey.
Croy, the third element there about the sales tax, what approximately does that generate, the 0.2%?
And again, this is going to be very rough.
I understand it.
Each 0.01, right now we've got a 0.2 and a 0.15. So each 0.01 will generate roughly in the order of $1 million in a given year. So with the 0.35 combined, they'll usually generate in the range of $35 million. Now, as sales tax, rises and falls, we could be above or below that number in any given year. And certainly in the earlier years, it was much lower, and later years it's been gaining. But that's the general order of magnitude. I'd have to double check with the treasurer's office.
Sure, no, that's fine.
But that's in the order of magnitude, just for your awareness.
Oh, yes. Commissioner.
Hi, Corey, Commissioner Olson. On the list of 7 topics that were on there, again, I apologize coming in late as a new commissioner. How did those come to be? And is that something we can discuss or comment on adding topics to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, it came from a number of different areas, and we can bring that back as to how we went about that. But it came from a certain aspect of, and I'm going to have to remember it. I think this discussion goes back in the order of 5 to 6 years with the commission in various ways. And so it's evolved over time, but the science and education, absolutely. Land acquisition is one. Then we have kind of the baseline costs that the general fund tends to cover. And we've had spirited explanations of such fun things as what it costs to clean toilets and
Yes.
things of that nature that are included in that. We find our users very much appreciate clean toilets. But then we have the science, we have the education, and then we had the elements of the trails and trailheads, which are other elements that are funded currently out of the preserve tax. We also had the cultural resources. So we were looking at, really quite honestly, we were looking at some of the master plans that we have to help guide us as to where some of those funding sources. Then we had the invasives, the restoration, and the wildland fire kind of in a grouping. And, we've tried to work to make some logic out of those. And if the preference is to separate one of those or subset one, the goal or the expectation under some of the education and research is there'll probably be several subsets possibly under that. We may roll it up into one, but we'll have that. And we've had presentations on much of the science, but we haven't yet. We're working with the Conservancy in putting together a presentation on some of the cost expectations and the range of things that could be included in that. So that's one of the upcoming presentations, obviously.
It's possible that we haven't reached that point yet, and there's a division that will come out. But the concern I'm thinking of is that, we are here to preserve this and ensure that, years and years and years from now, it still exists, and it exists as it is today. And so the question I have is, and there's plenty of examples now with wildfire and invasives and stuff like that of issues that we know about that we're funding. But my question is, how do we assess the ongoing impact of the use of the preserve and what's happening in the preserve? And I haven't seen any budget items yet for how we're, assessing, evaluating, measuring. I don't know what all the right terms are of the preserve. Is that something that's going to show up yet that we haven't seen?
I think you'll see that with the research side of that some of that is aimed at, monitoring long-term monitoring, and and there may be a couple different areas where some of that makes sense. Under the discussions we're having, we have invasives, and there's managing or taking proactive action against invasive plant species. And then there's long-term monitoring of that to see if the work that's being done is indeed resulting in the outcomes that we're looking for. And monitoring of our new things showing up or our new patches of a particular invasive showing up somewhere. So I think you will see that, whether we have it perfectly covered or not, or whether we've described it in the way that you might be looking for. That's part of the purpose of, I think, the upcoming discussions. But, you know, there have been studies in the past about impact of trails, trail use, trail erosion, things of that nature. So all of those would be things that we would look at. What we're not trying to, what we've not attempted to predict is that some unforeseen event happens down the road and that we have some contingency for that. The general thought on that has been that if something happens, and I almost don't want to say certain things and risk them occurring, but if something dramatic were to happen in some portion of the preserve, that would make more sense to approach that on a very specific funding request, and whether that's to call to the voters or whether that's a request of the general fund, that you would not look to predict those traumatic events, you know, of earthquake or fire or something of that nature, but rather you would deal with that in a different format. This has been more aimed at those things that we think we can predict and project and put those in. And there's always the opportunity in the future to reassess that and look at different things, and whether that's on a 5-year basis, 10-year basis. And the other thing that we haven't gotten into much detail is that whatever we end up looking for in the way of funding and the method of doing that, the expectation is that if we're using taxpayer dollars, they're going to want to make sure that they're being, looked at or managed appropriately, effectively, and that those are opportunities both for the commission to make recommendations to the council, and that would be, you know, the type of thing. And we see that in some of our other boards and commissions, be it in other areas of grant funding or things like that, that would probably make some sense, that have been talked about, but we've never fully formalized what that sounds like or looks like.
Yeah, and I certainly don't believe that we need to worry, I mean, or plan for earthquakes and, you know, the big disasters. And as I was thinking about this topic, I realized it's too big, but I don't have the skills or know how to manage it, because do you go out and monitor butterflies and bats and grasshoppers and toads, and, you know, there's so many things to monitor, but what is it that we need to monitor to establish the general health of the preserve and know that the preserve is healthy and moving and surviving?
So those are going to be excellent questions when we come back. I'm not sure if that'll be ready for the first meeting in September or second, but those types of questions are excellent. We're going to have some numbers for you to start looking at, and that'll be perfect. And there's some discussion, because a lot of that evolves from the ecological resource plan, easy for me to say, and that, you know, is there a representation or a re-review of that should be part of an early stage, because we do have that, and it's very general, but it may make sense that as we kind of go through this process, well, what do we need to do? The questions that you have, and do we need to do those things every year, once every 3 years, 5 years, whatever's that appropriate, you know, sequence, and how do we kind of plan in some budgeting for that, may make sense to make sure that aligns well with the ERP as well. So there's several things that I think are going to come out of this discussion that we will collectively want to identify as future work items as well.
Cool. And that's what I was looking for, is that it's coming. So it wasn't clear for me when I read the 7 topics that it was in there, but
it is indeed.
Marvelous. I had another question. Can I just continue?
Sure, go ahead.
Changing topics a little bit. When you were talking about the right-hand column of that spreadsheet of the funding aspect of it and potential funding sources, is there not an existing budget within the city of Scottsdale that pays for a portion of these services already? Will that continue, or are we cutting that off and having to fund everything going forward?
That was really part of that's the philosophical policy debate that I think is very much appropriate for this commission and the council and the community to have. From your predecessors on the commission, one of the concerns was, as we've gone through difficult economic times over the past 15 years, and sometimes when budget cuts are having to occur, the concern was, is there an assurance of a certain amount of funding source? Might not be 100%. But maybe we say we want 70% or whatever. So that's where the second row on there about the maintenance is kind of the element that is funded by the general fund. It's about $900,000 in the estimate that we have there right now. And that's an area that indeed is funded substantially by the general fund. And so the question philosophically is, do we want to identify a funding source that would guarantee all or a high percentage of that? And I'm not here to advocate one way or the other, but previous commissions raised that question. And one of the early starts to this discussion was, well, there's some remaining funding from the two preserve taxes. And would it make sense to take that money and if we're not going to spend it all on land acquisition or other improvements? And I'm not advocating for or against, but there was a discussion that maybe we take 30, 40, 50 million of that and create a method of investing that, so to speak, that would generate funds. There's a lot of legal complications we got into with that particular idea, and it really has evolved to, is there a separate funding source that we would, or a dedicated funding source that we would like to assure that would be dedicated to at least some percentage of these preserve elements, preserve costs. So that's really what this entire exercise starts to look at least for the items 2 through 7. Land acquisition may be at separate, but again, we can work our way through that. And clearly we have funding still available in the 2 existing taxes that can handle a certain amount of land acquisition or other improvements. And so that'll be part of the discussion as well, what we have available in the 2 existing, as one expires in 2025, the other in 2034. So those are all things that we can talk through. That help answer that question?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? So at this point, we're just looking at what those topics will be and putting those in some order.
And
And I know
so,
you and I have talked about that a little bit. We'll
yeah,
carry
we
on
can
that.
follow up
Mhm.
with the chair. Like I said, I'll clean up that chart a little bit based upon the council's items, and they're not radical, but we'll just make some tweaks and then look at filling out the calendar for the fall and making sure you've got the opportunity to see these things and be able to get to the council and get feedback from the council.
I think one of the critical pieces I would ask you to bring back to us, and I'm sure we've seen the numbers before, but that would be what kind of dollars are left in that from the tax, what we can anticipate, so that we can be reasonable and appropriate in how we see that those dollars could be spent or where it's best to put those dollars.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, on to item number 7.
Okay.
128th Street status and streets master plan.
So this has been an item that we'd had a presentation on in the spring. And I believe it was the last meeting or second to last meeting, that there was a request to get a little bit of history and update about this. And so a couple of things I'm going to start with. This of course shows 128th Street from Dynamite at the top down to the entry into the Tom's Thumb Trailhead. And this next graphic just highlights, we're well aware that there's been construction activity in the areas that are not owned by the preserve, those areas that are not green on this. And then this next graphic then shows that the road construction itself had been occurring. And I think the next slide shows the first phase that has been completed. And then they're now working on the area south of that blue dot. So this was a couple of years ago when they started the construction, and then this past spring, the completion of this portion of 128th Street going south from Ranch Gate down towards the trailhead. And so about not quite a half mile or 3/8 of a mile, it's improved, fully improved, and they'll be completing the rest of that into Tom's Thumb over the next year. I think it'll be about maybe late next year that they will finish up all the work. They have to do the same type of work, putting in water, sewer, and then the paving of the streets. And I think we mentioned at one of the last meetings, one of the good things about this is this will result in water being delivered to the Tom's Thumb Trailhead. And we'll be bringing you updates on that in the future as well. And so with that, that raised questions about the area to the north of Ranch Gate. And there are no plans for construction in that area. It is a construction access way that was stipulated by the council for the various improvements that are going on, single family residential in the area south. And so that was a requirement of the council a couple of years ago that the developers in that area use that piece of roadway. And it is right of way. It's not in the preserve, but we do have the preserve on both sides in the green. And so a little bit of history then about where this stands on the master plan, the streets master plan that the Transportation Commission, Transportation Department pay attention to. Going back in 2015, the Preserve Commission was reviewing the status of that, and there was a update to the Transportation Master Plan being proposed at that time. And the Preserve Commission did recommend to the council and the Transportation Commission to redesignate 128th Street, the portion through the preserve, in essence, from Ranch Gate to Jomax, to redesignate it from a minor collector to an emergency access and public path trail. Now, ultimately, that did not complete. That action did not go forward. And the status of the master plan today remains as a minor collector. In 2019, there was discussion about the master plan. There was a presentation to the commission, but it did not result in any action ultimately by the council at that time. And so there's been recent discussion, and this next slide then, in both this year and into next year, the Transportation Commission will be evaluating the master plan and will consider possible updates. The next slide highlights that I will be able to advise you of a virtual open house that will be opening later this month, that citizens will be able to make comments to, that will go to the Transportation Commission. We will advise to you when that process opens up. It'll be a web page that you'll be able to link on and provide comment to as citizens. But I know there's an interest of this commission, much as occurred in 2015 and previous discussions, based on the time frame of the process. I would expect something later this year would be the appropriate opportunity for this commission. We can bring a presentation to you. We can explain to you the ideas of emergency access with public path that were in the right of way. There's also a water line that would be in that location, but all would be within right of way, not within the preserve. But the opportunity to make a recommendation similar or different than what the commission did in 2015 would be available to you. And as I said, I don't know whether that's October, November, but sometime later this year is my expectation, in a couple months of when we'd be prepared to have that in front of you. That would then go, the Transportation Commission would be reviewing, and they'll have many different elements that they may be looking to update, and then that would go forward to the council. So that's the process that is essentially developing or moving forward, and would be the appropriate opportunity for this commission to speak to this particular element with relationship to the Transportation Master Plan. With that, that's what I had for a brief history and update, and I'm happy to take any questions from the commission at this time about this
Just a
item.
quick question, Scott, if we could go back to that previous slide, just refresh my memory on in 2015, when the Preserve Commission made a recommendation to the city council, they just chose to do nothing at that time
And
with the
there's
recommendation?
there's a number of different things that were occurring, and some of it had to do with zoning, some of it had, as far as cases in the area. It also had to do with, at that time, 118th Street, which is also on the Transportation Master Plan, was not completed, and we actually didn't even have the right of way to complete it. Since that point in time, 118th Street has been completed. There were also concerns from other neighborhoods about putting more traffic on streets in their neighborhoods by having a section closed or removed. There were also the construction considerations that the council dealt with a couple, 3 years ago, all led to basically tabling that aspect of it until a later point in time. Now, some of the things that were expected, the improvements of 118th Street have since completed, and would then be an opportunity for the commission to re-request consideration of that. But in effect, the bottom line is that the Transportation Master Plan in 2015 and before identified this section as a minor collector, and it still does today. And I understand the commission has long had an interest in this, and we've always said we will keep track of that process. And when the next opportunity comes up, you'll have the opportunity to provide input to the commission, to the Transportation Commission and the City Council. And so that process is coming.
Yes, we did talk about that. You and I did talk about that. So, but now that portion to the north is graded perhaps by the builder. I assumed it would stay in the condition it was in, but it is now graded.
That was a requirement of the zoning case, the council specifically required, and that road has been graded over the years, either by local residents or once in a while by our own street maintenance, in order to assure that you don't completely lose your oil pan when you're driving down that road. It will rut out without a little bit of maintenance over time. And so with the requirement that they were required to provide construction access through that, they had to do a little bit of smoothing, all within the right of way, none of it within the preserve. They were required by the council to do those basic improvements. There's no paving that occurred. It was simply a matter of grading, which, as I said, has been done periodically, maybe somewhat inconsistently over the years, but has been done.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes,
Commissioner
this is
Cluccio.
Commissioner Cluccio here. So when the construction in that area terminates, will the builder's responsibility to grade that road end at that point in time? Do we know?
And again, the responsibility is one really of making just sure that it's passable for them. So if we were to get a large rainstorm and it made the road impassable, they would be doing it for their own purposes. As I
Right.
said, the city has at times done a little bit of work, as have some of the neighbor property owners out
Right.
there.
But the various developers that are putting up houses in that area and the resort, their responsibility would end at some point in time, I would assume.
That's correct.
Is there any plans or discussion about paving the road either north of Ranch Gate or north of Jomex? Nothing that we know of?
There's no funding, other than the master plan simply suggests that it would be a minor collector, of which would typically then be a paved road. I mean, what is being built from Ranch Gate to Tom's Thumb Trailhead is a minor collector.
Mhm.
And so that implies that somewhere in the future, but we have the general plan, master plan identifying many things that are not completed and are not funded in our capital projects or requirement of a developer per se. And so there are no plans in the 5-year CIP, which would be the typical place that one would find the city being committed to doing something. And to my knowledge, none of the developments that are occurring in the southern portion towards Tom's Thumb would necessitate or require this to be improved. So that's not proposed or planned at this time.
Okay, and then my last question is, there is some work being done on 118th Street, north of Ranch Gate. It looks like maybe they're widening the road. Do we know if that's the case?
Yes.
And will that go all the way to, is it Dynamite or Rio Verde at that point?
Either or, as far as Rio Verde or Dynamite.
Yeah, where does Rio Verde
I
start?
probably use both, and I'm not sure
Nobody
which
knows.
is actually, I guess I'd have to go look at the street sign to see where it changes on that.
But they are 4-laning the
Well, the
118th
improvements that
Street?
you're seeing are being done by a developer on their frontage of their
Ah.
property.
Okay,
The improvements that were done, that ended about a year ago, they opened up 118th Street all the way to Rio Verde.
Mhm.
That got us the connectivity that was desired. And that
Mhm.
was a crucial connectivity step that is a paved improvement that is an alternate to, say, Alma School in case there were to be a emergency or
Mhm.
traffic situation that necessitated an alternative. But there are, as you pick up from Happy Valley at Alma School and go east, it is a 4-lane cross section that then comes around and sweeps up to the north and becomes 118th
Mhm.
Street. And then at some point there, probably about a quarter mile north, it necks down to 2 lanes. The plan is much of that would widen over time to 4 lanes.
okay.
I think at least to Joe Max. I don't know if it continued. I'd have to go back and look at the master plan to see. I think it may neck down from 4 to 2 at some
At
point
that point.
before it gets to Rio Verde Dynamite. But I'm
Mhm.
not the master of the streets master plan, so don't hold me to that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Perfectly accurate.
Commissioner Olson?
Hi, this is Commissioner Olson. Just for context, the reason we're considering this road is because this is what's called the gooseneck, and it's a very thin area that animal life has to move through as the development continues, and makes it more and more difficult for the animal life to make it through for the southern region to have a healthy animal life. I'm taking it as your recommendation is that we wait until sometime late in 2021 before we make a recommendation to city council. And I guess my question is, what's the logic behind why not make it now? I mean, we're all here. I mean, if we could vote on it, I don't know what everybody else in the commission is thinking, but if we were to vote to say, we believe this needs to be gated and shut down to that proposal that you had described, why not make that now? Why wait?
It's a process issue, just to be very candid and clear, is the Transportation Commission, much as this Preserve Commission has overview of the access plan or land acquisition or other things like that. They are opening up a process to look at that master plan, and they'll be taking citizen comment, public comment, and that will then be the opportunity for this commission as they develop their recommendations and everything that would go forward to the council. It's very appropriate when we bring our trailheads forward for municipal use master site plan approvals. We start with this commission. This commission makes a recommendation. It has to go through our development review board, our planning commission, and then the council And so it's just a process requirement that that master plan is overseen by the Transportation Commission. So they open that up. And all I'm saying is in visiting with the Transportation Department as to what their time frame is, they expect their commission to be making a recommendation sometime in early 2022. And so having your recommendation to come to them and before they won't change your recommendation, whether they agree with it or disagree with it, but they will, that would then forward with that. So when that presentation of what may be several things associated with the master plan, that would then be included with that and would be current, would be consistent with whatever ideas that you all have and whatever the transportation and the citizenry has to the that master plan element, and that goes before the council.
I guess I'm thinking that if we were to, and I'm completely new to politics, so I apologize, but if we were to make a recommendation now, it feels like our voice would be heard going into the process of the Transportation Commission evaluating versus us showing up at a public forum and saying, hey, you know, we'd like to close this. We've already made our recommendation to the city council. That seems like that would have a lot of weight. And I'm trying to weigh that against what I believe you're proposing is we go together with the commission, the Transportation Commission presenting.
And again, I think it simply speaks to that element will be scheduled to be presented and heard by the council. And we're just lining you up to be able to meet that time frame and to be able to get your voice heard. I don't think it will impact the weight of your voice at all. I think the recommendations from the Preserve Commission will weigh fairly with the council, but they'll also be able to consider it with any other elements or things that are being proposed at that time consistent with that process.
I think I'd have to still take you to task on that one, Croy. I know you and I have talked about that before on the phone. And if the commission could make a recommendation to the council in 2015, and I believe the commission, the council would like to hear a recommendation from this commission now on this topic, we have the right to do that. And I know that I was told otherwise, and that was taken off of our agenda. But it is something that impacts the preserve immensely. And the health of the north to south aspect of the preserve. As you mentioned, it's a very thin corridor. So it's, I would like to see this come back as an opportunity for us to vote and make a recommendation to the council at our September 2nd meeting.
And just be clear, the November 2015 was part of this same type of process. It was not just a request from the blue. There was a evaluation of the master plan that was going on. And that was then scheduled. The transportation staff came, did a presentation, and we had the extensive discussion about what's described in there as far as what a emergency access and public path trail. There was input from police, fire, water, were all involved in that because of the various aspects of that. And the reason for police fires, emergency access response times, and that losing a section of public street could have an impact on that, and had life safety issues. Also had issues to do with the, in case there were a emergency like a wildland fire requiring evacuation, that evacuation routes would be available. And so all I'm suggesting is that was part of a process that was sequentially worked through. And that's all we're suggesting here is that item won't be scheduled to the council until it's coming from the Transportation Commission. And so to that extent, that is looking at a early 2022. And so to have your recommendation parallel with that was the expectation and the goal.
Okay, I will still beg to differ with you from conversations that I've had, that this is something that we can have a recommendation for the city council on. And that it has been taken up certainly above the commission's head, then this would be acceptable for us to do. However, that would still have to come back in September 2nd, the September 2nd meeting, since we can't do it. It was denied for this meeting. So I do want to carry on and have conversation though about 128th in general, if there's comments to be made. I would ask for those comments now.
Commissioner Hackbarth,
Right? I didn't see you, Marcia. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm just going to ask if you can supply us with whatever was said, whatever was presented in November of 2015. And whatever discussion was going on in 2019. And I'm not quite understanding, if citizens can offer comments to the Transportation Commission. Does that mean that, is that something you want us to do as individuals? Is to submit something to them in the comments?
Every citizen's going to have the right to do that when they open that web page up. And so I just wanted to make sure you were aware that that process was coming, and that as part of that process, much as when we begin a process on a trailhead, we will have a public process that will open up. We typically, pre-COVID, we would have open houses that instead of virtual, they would be physical. There'd be opportunity for people to see ideas, present them. So there will be things in there. But it will be an opportunity that you and anyone, as a citizen of Scottsdale, will have the opportunity to speak to. So that I just wanted to make sure you were aware that that was coming sometime here in this month, and that then the next process, as typically we would bring you comments on a trailhead, you would review those, make suggestions, we might make adjustments to that, and we would go back out to that process. So that's what will happen from that open house in August, is the Transportation Commission will look at that, make suggestions. And they said they're aiming for a recommendation to the council sometime in early 2022. So that they'll be looking for feedback. And I don't know if there will be other commissions that will have potential interest or not, but they will, much as the general plan staff came and presented to you and had participation over a period of time, that eventually led to your recommendation to go forward to the council. You didn't do that before the package was ready. You did it with the package and the input. And so it's simply a timing issue to make sure that your comments are included in the up-to-date package. And that's all I'm suggesting, is that if I were to go forward with this to the city attorney's office, they would tell me this is out of sequence. And that's all I'm attempting to avoid. We're talking a matter of probably the difference between a September meeting and a late October, early November, a couple of months. There's no plans for construction, no plans for improvements to occur out there. And it would take a couple of years for that to happen anyway. So we're not trying to prevent you. We're trying to get the process lined up so that I think it will be most effective to have it be part of that process than to be a separate standalone when there's something else going on. And you may well get support from the Transportation Commission as well. I can't speak to that at this time, but that would be the logic of bringing that forward in that process.
And Commissioner Coluccio?
Commissioner Coluccio, so Transportation Commission will be evaluating master plan to consider possible updates. Do we know for a fact that they will be evaluating this specific issue?
Again, the entire master plan and
So
this element is within that. So the opportunity to propose that, knowing that it's been proposed before in previous efforts, because again, that recommendation went to would go to the Transportation Commission and the council. So that would be in perfect alignment with that.
So is it possible that as kind of a plan B to what Chairman Winstrom is suggesting or talking about, is there a mechanism by which this commission can send a communication to the Transportation Commission and, at least let them know what our thoughts are prior to their undertaking this evaluation?
That could certainly, excuse me, could certainly include either just a general communique, or it could be a letter from the chair at the request of this commission to the Transportation Commission that you would like consideration of 128th Street designation as a minor collector in this area to be considered.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Hackbar.
I think we need to also, this is Commissioner Hackbarth, we need to also consider in the future, the overpass over the Rio
Rio Verde?
Dynamite or whatever it is.
Mhm.
That should also be in line with what our idea is about 128th. So until we get that straightened out as well, there's no sense in having two opposite.
Absolutely. Good point. And there's a very open area of land here that I'm looking at. It's visible on the map as well. But when I look at the land that would align with 136 to 128th, I would like, and I will direct staff to please determine the ownership of that land and whether or not that's something that we want to look at purchasing for the preserve.
I just didn't hear that.
Purchasing the land. Can you find out the ownership, please, on the private property that's listed there on the square? It would be south of Rio Verde. It aligns with 136 and it's flanked also by 128th Street. Yes. Mhm.
And so that's a full square mile of land that is owned by many property owners.
Okay. Can you determine who that's owned by?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's all public record.
Okay. Can you bring that back to us on September 2nd?
Yep.
Okay. Right. We'd certainly want to know what would be the process to acquire that land if we wanted to bring that into the preserve.
So I think that we'll need to have a discussion about that. That is not within the recommended study boundary of the preserve.
Mhm.
And so that would require several steps to pursue something out of that. And again, as I said, it is private property owned by many different property owners.
Mhm. So
And there are homes built in those areas that
Mhm.
it is not undeveloped land. It has a substantial number of homes built in that area.
Okay, I'm sorry, Commissioner Olson, you were saying something?
And I'm not sure what the process might be, and maybe the process is at the end of this meeting to make a recommendation to have this as an agenda topic. But I think the question is, we just don't know how many properties there are, or what would be how would one go about acquiring that land? But that's a very important piece of property in the gooseneck. And if we were to, I would propose that if we were to make a recommendation to city council on land to buy, that would be a high priority land. But I don't know what I'm asking for. And I don't know the impact to the people, I don't know the disruption. And so I guess we're looking for, how do we acquire that?
So I think first step, we'd need to come back and just talk about land acquisition process and what's in that. And we can agendize that for September.
Okay.
Okay, so that'll be a recommendation then to agendize that with the ownership ability.
Yep.
Knowledge. Yes. Mhm. Commissioner Coluccio?
Commissioner Cluccio, so just building on what Commissioner Hackbar said about the overpass, and I think your comment was to include that in this process, perhaps. The other problem area in that I mentioned at the last meeting was the difficulty that users now have crossing Rio Verde. And is there a possibility of including some kind of a safety crosswalk there, to improve the safety element, for those users? So I don't know whether that gets dovetailed in as well. I don't want to necessarily make all this more complicated than it needs to be, but that's certainly an issue that, that at some point in time, as time goes on, it needs to be addressed more and more. So.
And I can just offer that There are aspects of the master plan that do reference the land bridge or some type of connection there. So it's not that it's not covered by it. It's what we've been talking about with the cost issue is trying to identify a long-term funding source and what the order of magnitude of that cost might be. So it is out there, but we can certainly bring back clarification of what that looks like and make sure that you're all aware of and comfortable with that as well. Then to your point about the access issue there, we can visit, we have visited with transportation about that, but we can bring back a presentation on that as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Olson? Mhm.
Commissioner Olson, I'm going back to the letter from the chair to the Transportation Committee. We've never polled this group to know that we're in agreement to do that. How do we get that? What's the process for us to get to a point of we are telling the chair that we would like her to write that letter?
So that is something that we could agendize for September 2nd to consider a letter to present from the Preserve Commission to the Transportation Commission chair for that next September meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a question on 128. Is that currently gated so that emergency access is closed?
The
Is that
section that we're
gated?
showing here, no,
So
it's
it's
all public
open.
road. That's all public right of way. So that would not be able to be done without an amendment. And again, it is stipulated that it be the council directed the developers to use that as their access in order to minimize impact on other neighborhoods.
Understood. I just wondered, is it possible to gate that, to keep that area as available to animals and just to minimize the traffic on that road? Because I'm guessing that other people are using that as well. If it were gated and open during construction times and then closed during, just like the preserve hours, is that an opportunity for this commission to talk about?
You can certainly talk about it. It's the management of it is going to require some involvement from, like I said, back to our emergency services. Because again, not that they necessarily rely on it on a primary route, but it is a secondary, and change of that magnitude is again, the right of way is under the control of the city transportation department and the other agencies within the city that utilize that. So they would have to be the ones that would make those decisions.
Okay, so other than the fact, of course, that we can't vote on it because it's not agendized tonight, but we still don't have the ability to, or not vote on that, to make a recommendation. We still can't add that, even to discuss the gates, potential for gating that.
Well, I can certainly work on looking to agendize a discussion on that and bring the transportation and the police, fire
Right.
into that. I'm not going to guarantee that I can do that by the first meeting of September, but I can work on gathering those groups and doing the best we can as soon as possible.
Right.
It won't be a long time, but I just don't know if whatever that is, 3 weeks from now, I can assure that I'd have them ready to present that.
But even still, we do not have the right as the McDowell Sonoran Preserve Commission to make a recommendation to the city council about gating that aspect of the road.
Let me double check on that one. It's again, it's a right of way issue that's
Mhm.
not within the preserve. And I'm happy to explore that with the attorney's office. That's not one I've considered before. So I'd be
Okay.
happy to look at that.
Can you bring that back to us, or perhaps? we
I can reach out to
speak
you
about
pretty
it?
quickly after I
Okay.
visit with them. So yeah, I'll
Great.
update you on that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on this topic? Comments? Good to go. Thank you. On to staff reports number 8.
Thank you, Chair Wenstrom, Commissioners. This is Scott Hamilton, Preserve Manager. I'm going to go through several items here in the staff report. First, I just added this in kind of at the last minute. I thought you'd like to see. This was yesterday afternoon, Lost Dog Wash from the 124th Street Bridge looking upstream in the wash. Just thought that was a fun picture to share because it's something that we do not see very often. But John and Madison just happened to be out there and saw the wall of water coming and snapped some photos. And with the rain, I know a lot of you folks live up that direction and have seen it with your own eyes, but over the last 2 days, we got quite a bit of rain. So the CNM crew, the construction and maintenance trail crew, of city staff and conservancy stewards have been out. There's no better time. I loved this photo of the stewards actually watching where the water was flowing. There's no better way to determine how to do the maintenance on the trail than to actually watch the water on the trail. So we'll be keeping after that. So quick update on Pima Dynamite. We are getting very close to being complete. If you've been out there, we have shifted the parking. I'll show you that here in a second. So the public is now up in the parking lot. Although this picture was taken inside the construction fence, we still have the building fenced off. There's some items that the contractor is finishing inside the building. The number one thing that we're waiting on right now is we've been faced with a supply delay on essentially the electrical pedestal that connects the APS line. It's currently coming in from the street and all the building is all wired. We just need the piece of equipment that connects the two together. And we're looking at a several week delay right now on securing that piece of equipment. But just here's some shots looking from the parking lot up towards the building. This is north of the building looking south. This on the right-hand side here is the Art Deco Booter Amphitheater. This is looking across the amphitheater, kind of back to the east. You can see the small meeting room and office is on this side. This is the entryway. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong screen. This is the small meeting room and office over here. You've got the breezeway coming through the center. These are the restrooms over on this side. This has gotten a lot of action lately. You could see this beam that's coming out from the building here. This is where all the roof water drains onto this rock, and they've just been planted, so they're very small right now, but there is a plethora of milkweed and chuparosa in this rainwater collector. It's passive rainwater harvesting. So it'll be fun to watch this in the coming weeks with all the rain we've been getting, but certainly over the coming years to watch this area grow. I think it's going to become quite a mecca for the pollinators. I mentioned the public access. We have a couple of weeks ago now, we closed off the dynamite access so that the south driveway can be built. And we're currently routing the public traffic in off of Pima Road up to a portion of the parking lot where we have a temporary trail access. This was a shot that I took just several days ago of, you might recognize the pipe rail and the towers that are in this parking lot. This is the old gravel parking lot that's now having the road, the driveway cut through it for the south entry. And once that's complete, we'll open that entry. Once the building is complete, we'll open the building. We've been spending quite a bit of time lately. You might recognize one of the characters in this photo is Conservancy Steward and Commissioner Carrie Olson that's here with us tonight. What we're doing here, and the next picture kind of illustrates it a little better. We've got two large sign panels that are on both sides of that breezeway as you enter. And for, months, probably the better part of a year now, city staff have been working very closely with the staff and a collection of the stewards, with Commissioner Olson as one of the leads, coming up with not only the content, what we're going to put onto these signs. A lot of it's interpretation, interpretive information about the flora, fauna, geology, but also the orientation information, the maps of this area with route suggestions on, different hikes or mountain bike or equestrian rides that people would want to take. So what we were doing here earlier this week, this was our second time out where we plotted the paper to scale versions of the signage. We went out and this is actually paper on the wall that's just thumbtacked up there. We went through a process where we tacked it up, we reviewed it, we made a bunch of changes where we moved things around. And then when we were out there earlier this week was kind of our second go with fewer number of changes now, but we're slowly honing in and we're getting real close. And then what this would ultimately be is printed on actual, they call them ACM panels, but those actual sign panels that we use and would get placed on these walls. There's also a set of signage that's out to the north of the building where all the different trails start. There's just another angle on that. And then we've been busy with the contractors in the parking lot, putting in the site signage. Just a couple shots of that. We did last week have the Pathfinder cart has been delivered. It's now inside the building. So all the little details are starting to come together. And we're hoping for a soft opening of the building, probably mid to latter part of September. And we are, I have a slide coming up later with some of our October events. We're looking at October 16th. It's a Saturday in the middle of October to have a dedication ceremony here. So jumping over to Fraserfield Trailhead and the trail that, about a year ago or so now, the city council, with a recommendation from the commission, voted to name it in honor of former Mayor Sam Campana. So the name of the trail will be the Camino Campana Interpretive Trail at the Fraserfield Trailhead. And these photos that I have are from several weeks ago. We were out and did basically the same thing I just described at Pima Dynamite, where we printed out the sign panels to scale. Here, we didn't have a building to tack them to, so we basically attached them to foam core boards, and the folks standing here were literally holding them about where they would be, so we could get a sense of scale. One comment that came out of this was everything was too small. When we print it, you do it on the computer and you look at it in the office, but once you take it out into the wide open desert, everything seemed to have gotten way smaller. So one of the major comments, things that we're adjusting now are the sizes of the panels, and still doing edits and collecting photos and things like that. So we are looking for the October events. It's not October, but September, leading into October, we would take the mayor would present his proclamation for October being McDowell Sonoran month. And then October 16th, we're looking at the Pima Dynamite Trailhead dedication. And then Sunday, October 31st, which of course is Halloween, doing the Camino Campana Interpretive Trail dedication. More details to come. We'll get details out once we have start times, but the 16th will probably be a little earlier in the morning. For the 31st, since it's a Sunday, and it's Halloween, we're looking at maybe a midday, sometime maybe between 11 and 2 kind of time frame, but more details to come on that. Before I move on to the next section, is there any questions on Pima Dynamite or Fraserfield?
Commissioner Olson?
Commissioner Olson, Scott, I can't thank you enough for the work you do. The paper signs were that's an incredible idea, because it looks so much different when we put it up in actual size. And so thank you for everything you're doing. It looks fabulous.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Carrie. And thank you, because really the driver behind this has been the Steward Group, coming up with, and rolling forward all the experience that the Pathfinders have had at other trailheads over many, many years. Being able to have that expertise at the table of, when a visitor walks in, what do they ask? What do they expect? What do they look for? And I think we've, not to pat ourselves on the back, but I think this one will be the best one that we've had so far with some of the concepts and ideas. So thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so the next part that's on the staff report agenda is just to discuss a little bit about our summer messaging. We've been getting some questions lately. It was in the news media several weeks, a month or so ago, with the city of Phoenix, where their Parks Board voted to close Camelback and Piestewa on excessive heat days. So we've been getting some questions about it. So we wanted to just show you guys tonight. I know as you hiked in the preserve, you've probably seen a lot of these signs. The Phoenix program, we're keeping real close tabs on it. We talk with the Phoenix staff pretty regularly, directly, but they're also part of some of these regional networks that we're a part of, where we meet periodically and just talk about issues. So we're going to keep real close tabs on that, how that's going for them. It is a pilot program, and they expect later this year to be doing a presentation back to their Parks Board on kind of how it went and how people reacted, how it worked with their closures. But just to review, on the left here, obviously, it's a sandwich board out at one of the trailheads that we're just encouraging people to reduce the risk of us needing to come rescue them out of the preserve. The one on the right is a poster. It's just a screenshot of a poster that we also use on the sandwich boards in the excessive heat conditions. And then you're probably familiar with our message cabinets. This is at the Sunrise Trail. When it's really hot out, we put this heat is on message out. You can also see that lower one. It might be a little hard to read. That's our Be Aware for bees that we use mostly during the spring, usually from April to into the June, July timeframe. We have swarms of bees moving about through the preserve. And then, of course, the dog safety, the one on the left is our permanent dog safety sign that's at all the major access points. And then the snip that's on the right-hand side is the sign panel that goes in the changeable message cabinet that we use. And then over the last couple of weeks, at least since July, we seem to have been waffling back and forth between our heat messages, as we change them out, and which we're putting up now, our rain refrain signs. So we try to keep up as best we can with, when it's hot, we put all the heat messages up and then we switch them out. Once the rains have moved on and it's hot and humid, then we go back to the rain refrain signs after that. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner LaPapa.
Commissioner Pat Plasko, yeah, really great presentation. Quick question, do we have an opportunity to listen to the Phoenix, I guess it's Parks and Rec, who's doing this pilot study? Could they come and kind of give us a high level summary of what they discovered?
We could certainly check with them on how, right now they're still, I think they've only shut down maybe once or twice. So, I'm not sure if the weather keeps up like this, there may not be much more this summer, but I don't know too much. We can investigate more their timing on when they expect to have some sort of wrap up report or presentation. We can certainly touch base with them and bring that information to this group.
Yes, Commissioner Olson.
Commissioner Olson, I believe Phoenix was responding to excessive amounts of rescues in heat and putting the rescuers at risk. And I guess my question that I'm trying to formulate is, do we have the metrics of what they are responding to versus what Scottsdale is responding to? Are we doing better than them because of the signage and everything we're doing? Are we managing it effectively? Is there a threshold number that if we exceed, we're going to have the same sort of problem?
Commissioner Olson, I'm not positive if there would be a specific threshold, but we certainly have numbers. We have statistics from the technical rescues that occur in the Scottsdale Preserve. We have very good records on those. It's also dispatched all through the Phoenix system, so we can pull the Phoenix numbers as well if that's something that the commission would be interested in seeing.
Well, I personally, I don't want to go in that direction the way Phoenix has gone. If we can help it, I'm hoping that we can manage it other ways. So I'm looking for, any input on whether are we doing an appropriate job. So there's probably some feedback from the Scottsdale Fire Department and the Rescue Department as well.
And that's something we can certainly bring back as well, a broader discussion. We do work with our fire department. Excuse me. We've actually been in discussions with Phoenix, their department, and some others as well. Much as pool safety has a very strong campaign out there that you hear on the radio, that you see on TV. That's been some of our discussion with both our PR staff, as well as the fire staff, as well as other cities. And are there ways that we can develop campaigns that let you know on these excessive heat days, because that's something that can be identified. Now, it may be different down here in the valley versus 3,000 feet altitude up top, but we can still communicate that. And whether people are hiking in their neighborhood or whether they're hiking out in the preserve, what things do we want them to be aware of? And can we make sure that we have a consistent campaign and one that helps educate people, because we've generally found that education can go a long way towards altering some of those behaviors. Not for everybody, but we can try and work that out. So those are things that we'd be happy to bring back to you. As Scott said, we work with a network of other agencies, and we try and coordinate when we have similar messages, so that we're not confusing the public. And if we approach it one way in Phoenix, or the county regional parks, or the Tonto National Forest are doing it slightly differently, we may not be helping ourselves. And so those are some of the things that Scott is very involved in, and we'd be happy to bring that back.
So in some sense, it's bringing back the metrics, but I want to bring them back in such a way that we can evaluate, are we doing enough, or do we need to do more? Because I would rather be proactive, as I said, and better signage, better, more pathfinders, more, what does it take? How do we increase if we're having a problem? But I don't know whether, I don't think we're having a problem. I know we have rescues, but I just don't know where we are. So the metrics in such a way that it shows whether we're doing the right job or not.
I think that's a great question. We'll be happy to bring that back.
I have a question for you. One of my favorite signs has always been, did I miss you, Marcia?
Oh, no, it's okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My favorite signs is when it rains, please refrain, or whatever that verbiage is. I think it's very effective. But I'm wondering if we might look at that. It becomes a maintenance issue if we are not stating that often enough, or if we can't get people to observe that. I look at our golf courses, of course, they close down, they have frost warnings, et cetera, where they have to stop for a while, or whatever the case might be. They pull people off the course when there's lightning. Would we ever look at something like that in the preserve, where we can't keep up with the maintenance because people are not observing the signs? I'm just throwing thoughts out there.
But we effectively have on snow days. And
On snow, yes.
I think it was last March of 20.
Yeah, it was the week before the pandemic started.
A week
We were
before
dealing with
pandemic.
floods.
Well, we got 5 inches of rain in the north. And so we
remember
did close, I think that rain, I think the problem was that it rained during the week when we didn't have much use. And then the sun came out Saturday morning. And I believe we shut down for at least a day or two, not in the southern part of the preserve, but the northern part where the trail. So this guy is a part-time meteorologist, and we all do tend to pay attention to it, but Scott in particular. And so the forecast that week was telling us that there was a strong chance of a lot of rain. And so closing the preserve on a daily basis or on a short-term basis would be very difficult, because just the size and magnitude of doing that. But if we know that there is a particular issue and we can see it in advance, we do pretty well. And we learned a lot from our 2 snow begins.
We've learned that anytime they say snow down to 2,000 feet, to take it pretty seriously.
Good point.
And to your point about closures, what Croy was saying, when we've had these pretty severe events, we have closed. The first time we did it, we did it and we pulled it off, and the stewards are a huge help. They're crucial in that process. But we've learned, like, now we have stockpiles of barricades at our trailheads. We recently purchased about 100. They're the same size as our rules and regs signs, the 24 by 24. They're just white and black signs that say preserve closed by order of the preserve director. And they have hooks on the back of them, so we can hang them over top of the rules and regulation signs. Fortunately, since we've had them, we have not had to use them. It's been about 4 or 5 months that we've had those in our possession. But the point is, we're stockpiling caution tape, barricades, closure signs, so that when we do need them, whether it's a wildfire, whether it's a snow event, a flood event, heavy rains, whatever, that we're prepared to go out and put those signs up and close things down. And the trailheads are relatively, I don't want to say easy, because none of it's really easy, but it's more effective You close the gate, you put the sign up, put the barricades, the stewards help us and they station themselves there. But it's the 70 or so walk-in points that we have all around the edges of the preserve where people can just come in, through controlled access points, but it's hard when you have 70 of them to control them all. And we're investigating right now, constructing basically swing arms for the step gates so that we could, if we need to shut them all down. Right now, we rely on caution tape across them. Tends to work, but some people ignore it and go through. But we're exploring the ability to have some sort of steel swing arm that you can shut and essentially close those step gates and put the sign right on the front of it that the preserve is closed.
Excellent. And I do agree it would be localized because what impacts the south wouldn't necessarily impact the north vice
Yeah.
versa. It could be very trail localized. for
It
that
could be.
matter.
And the south, not only elevation is a huge difference and the weather conditions, but the trails from south of Tom's Thumb are much rockier. All of us who have hiked that area and ridden it know how rocky it is. Tends to be a lot more resilient than some of the trails up north that are more of the decomposed granite under really wet conditions that can get kind of soft.
Thank
And I
you.
would just add, not only is it wonderful to have the stewards and they're very helpful in the assistance, but it is also, it does require assistance from the police department to reinforce some of that. And so we have to be thoughtful about all of those different elements. And I happen to live in a neighborhood near the Phoenix Preserve and Piestewa, and they are only closing the main trailhead. They are not closing the neighborhood access points. And so you are seeing people driving more into the neighborhoods. And so that would be the other thing that we have to consider if we were to target like that. We need to think about where are we pushing the demand, because sometimes they'll go ahead and to the early commitments of not burdening neighborhoods. That would be one of the things we always think about is if we don't manage it holistically, we are concerned that we could put a burden on the neighborhoods. And so those are just a few of the many things that go into any consideration of doing that.
Sure.
And so, but we're more than happy to bring those details back to you and talk that through some more.
That'd be great. Thank you. And Commissioner Lips was next.
I just want to go back a little bit. I
And
just
you need
wanna-
to, Marcia, you need to speak, get right
Okay.
up to
There we
that
go.
microphone.
Just because something's been, bouncing around in my brain, I noticed that the new interpretive trail is called the Camino Campana. Where did the Camino come from?
It's essentially Spanish for the Campana Trail.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just wondering,
And to that point,
because I know we had named it after. San
yeah,
Campana,
yes.
So,
Well, so the theme of the trail is seeing the unseen desert. So a lot
Okay.
of the stops that are along it are about, the holes, like what does the cross section of a tarantula's hole in the ground look like? Really showing people things that are out here, but that only if you're really, really
It's a hidden
lucky,
desert.
you get to see them. But one thing that was of interest to former Mayor Campana is also being able to provide this information about the trail, not only in Spanish. So we're working on a separate set of the actual sign panels that are in Spanish that they won't be on the ground because, we're not going to put up numerous sign panels at every single stop. It would be a lot, but they will be available through QR codes where people would be able to go to the website and see that actual panel in Spanish. We're working on that now, but then the vision is that we could then branch out into many other languages for our international visitors and, residents here that speak various languages.
great, thank
Yeah.
you.
Commissioner Coluccio?
So Commissioner Cluccio here. So building off of Croy, you mentioned that potentially if we close trailheads, we could be pushing users into the neighborhoods to use the step over gates. Just a question going back to the Phoenix situation. They closed a couple of those trails maybe 2 weeks ago, I think it was. They actually did it for, I think, the only time that they actually closed. Did we notice, do you know, if there was any additional volume over in our preserve as a result of that closure?
We probably have to look at Now, I'm not hitting my balloon. We'd have to look at our data that isn't accessible at the moment, but we
At some
collect
point, it
that
might be good to
and we
know.
can review that and we'll look at that. Suspect that it may not have a major impact this time of year. It'd probably be more in the winter months. We worry about that if we
Sure.
would see that, but certainly a fair question. We can look at that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Nope, no other questions.
You can roll to the next slide.
Oops. That's
Guess
not
we're
the
supposed to
right-
revise it.
That's not the right slide.
Well, anyway, this was just to talk about, we got upcoming dates. Yeah, I did not think about this ahead of time, but I know I may have a conflict because of that first week of September on the 2nd. And I just did want to check, make sure you guys are all okay with the 2nd. If not, we can look at either the 9th or the 23rd as alternatives. But
This is Commissioner Olson. I am not available on the 2nd. I'll be out of cell phone range on Lake Powell.
okay. I didn't need to know about where, but just, I mean.
I just
that's-
wanted to throw
that's
that in.
Fine. But it was just a thought that we usually think of that when that date is real close to the holiday. And I didn't, what I can do is my suggestion, I'll send out one of my famous surveys and see if there's some alternative. If that's fair, I mean, we'll look to achieve 2 meetings in September and we'll just pick the best dates that work for everybody, if that's okay. And then the goal would be to visit with the chair and vice chair at a minimum, and we can talk about what we start filling in on these dates from our process requirements. And we have the heat metrics messaging. I have the land acquisition process and the consideration at the first available meeting, a letter from the chair to the Transportation Commission on that. And I will also have a couple other questions in there I'll work on, but we will look to schedule those in as reasonable and quick a manner as we can, is what I've heard so far in this meeting.
Great. And one of the things we also spoke about was making sure we have Tiffany come back to speak about our trail density, how it's impacting animals, et cetera. She was going to give us our report again.
Yep.
Give her.
And
her
we had
report
other
again.
things, and one of the other things is we've done presentations that several of you are new to the commission and did not see our series of presentations last fall. And so some of the elements on that worksheet that had numbers on them, we were going to bring back at least shorter presentations maybe, but still give you a chance to catch up on those. You're certainly welcome to go back and look at them on YouTube. But it would also, we think, benefit the group to see them and be able to raise questions or get clarity. So we will include that in this list of things to accomplish over the next 3 months. So we'll work on coordinating that in a fashion. We'll check on who all is available and when, and make sure we get those teed up for you.
Perfect. Commissioner Hepburn.
I'm glad you brought that up, and meshes with Scott's comment about 5 inches of rain. I'd like to hear what the Maricopa County Flood Control District, if that 5 inches had a blip on their records of what happens underground. That'd be great. Thank you.
So as it stands, though, Croy, we do want to remove the 2nd of September from our agenda for sure.
Well, let me run
Okay.
it by and just see if, I don't mean to direct it just on my schedule and one other, but it caused me to think about it
Okay.
and I wanted to ask. So I'll send the survey out and just see what availability is, at least for those September alternate dates, and see if we can get a full 7 available for that. I just think the more we can have all of you together, the better, in order to get our homework done and get a presentation ready for the council. So we will try and achieve 100% participation. So I'll run that back out to you. I'll try and do that tomorrow morning so you can all.
So
Give me
your
your
survey after the 6th for me.
After 6, that's fine.
Done with talking about the meeting dates then? Move
Yep,
forward.
I'm done.
Okay, great.
I'm good.
move on to number 10, which is commissioner comments. Things that you want to see on future agendas, this is your time to talk about that. Really, it doesn't matter how far out the agenda item might be. You can bring that up now so that it's noted so that we can track that on the list of things that we'll be putting into the agenda, or just general comments. Oh, yes, Commissioner Coluccio.
Commissioner Cluccio, so would it be possible for us to, even after the meeting, receive a copy of the presentation for our records, going forward?
Yeah, if that's easiest, they ultimately should be posted and within the agenda, you can click on them, but if it would be easier, we can certainly just.
Is it on the agenda?
They're not always before the agenda, but after the agenda, Ruth goes through and
Okay.
should link everything back to the
That's good
agenda
enough.
items.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, we find that the link got broken or whatever. So you can if there's anything you want and you're not getting it through technology, give us a call and we've got them, and they're all public record. We're more than happy to provide them to you.
Just good to have it for, review, at some point in the future. Thank you.
I have a question for you. Back in, let's see, would have been May, I think. I had asked staff to create a steward, basically a rack card that allows them to have a tool to share with people who want to bring an e-bike into the preserve, which of course is not allowed. And you are going to list area opportunities for them to take their e-bike.
Alternate.
And I know you were planning to have that ready for the fall season, which is literally upon us. I didn't know if you've made any headway with that or what the status might be with that.
I could speak a little bit to that. One of the regional groups that we're part of that has the county and Phoenix and the Tonto, this is a hot topic for everybody right now. We can certainly work towards, and in this group, we're actually working towards exactly what you're saying, because it's going to be beneficial to everybody. The challenge with it right at this moment is a lot of these agencies aren't sure how they're handling it. Some of them are allowing e-bikes with kind of as a default while they're thinking about how they want to do it ultimately. So we could certainly come up with kind of here's what everybody's doing right now, but it's sort of fluid and it's not perfectly clearly defined for everybody. A lot of what's happening right now is everybody's looking at each other, wondering what are they doing and what are they doing? So it's very much in its formative phase right now, but
Understood.
we can summarize what we've got so far.
And I think even if it is a dynamic document, it is dated like even our maps would be. And it just gives the stewards a tool because they're put into a very difficult position. And there was certainly a situation that came up a number of weeks ago, and we're sure we're all aware of that, but it's important that we give them at least something to speak from versus being left out in but you can't do this kind of a thing, and then issues happen. So thank you for doing that. Yes, Commissioner Olson.
Commissioner Olson, just on adding to that, as I understand it, we're the only place, the preserve is the only place that has said no to e-bikes. I don't believe there's any place else that's actually said no yet. Anybody know the answer to that?
Again, I think the challenge may be that our ordinance says no motorized vehicles, and then we've posted signs that say e-bikes are included in that, in essence, no motorized e-bikes prohibited. Others may have similar things, but they haven't been quite as clear. So back to Scott's point, a lot of people are trying to determine the definition as they're managing, because there are state law, federal law, and other things that are influencing people. And so, but as Scott said, everybody's kind of working on it. But we may not have absolute crystal clear messages from each of those different groups throughout the valley. But we'll do our best to have something, as the chair suggested, having something is better than nothing. And we may have to change it once a month or whatever that might be, but that's okay.
It's almost
It
even
makes
if it's the McDowell Park, because that is open to electric bikes and it's right next to us. And so stewards minimally, should be able to recommend there. But,
Yeah, that's the
I think
easy-
there's a few others that we could recommend and maybe leave the gray areas out.
Yeah. we can work on that.
Thank you. Any other items for the good of the commission, et cetera, et cetera? If not, I don't hear anything. I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Olson, I make it a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. And a
Commissioner
second, please.
Cluccio, seconds?
Thank you so much. And let's vote on that, starting with Vice Chair LaPat Palasco,
LaPat Palasco approves to adjourn.
Commissioner Coluccio,
Cluccio approves.
Commissioner Hackbarth,
Commissioner Hackbarth votes yes.
Commissioner Lips, Commissioner Olson,
Commissioner Olson approves.
Commissioner Smith,
Commissioner Smith approves.
and Chair Wenstrom approves. Thank you all.